So will Hunt's policy actually work? Farage at GBNews.uk. I'm joined by Liam Halligan, GB News' economics editor. As I say, Liam, half of me thinks he might have a point, but inflation was caused by much, much bigger factors than this, wasn't it?
Well, Andrew Bailey is becoming the not me governor of the Bank of England because he likes to point to other reasons why inflation is so high in the UK and higher than most other major Western economies. And a big reason why inflation is so high is, of course, because as we've discussed, the Bank of England, as late as November 2021, when inflation was at 4 or 5%, more than double the Bank of England's target, he was still telling everybody, don't worry, it's transitory. And they weren't. Because they didn't put up interest rates early enough, they've had to put interest rates up faster, starting later and more, causing more pain. And of course, the Bank of England created more money in the single year, first year of lockdown, than they did in the whole of the previous 10 years in response to the global financial crisis.
And the previous 10 years had been a period of
massive monetary expansion under so-called quantitative easing. But he has got a point when he says that the workforce is smaller, so that's pushing up wages, particularly skilled wages, and there are many people who've retired in their 50s rather than carrying on. But it's a much, much smaller number. It's tens of thousands. It's less than 0.5% of the workforce. The real issue is that 450, 500,000 people, 500,000, have basically checked out of the workforce after lockdown with health-related issues, long COVID, and so on. And that's a major reason why wages are companies are having to compete for workers. Vacancies are still very high. That's keeping wages high, but still, of course, wages are much, much lower than inflation, so real wages are actually negative.
In simple English, Liam, we've created more money, so there's more money chasing the same number of goods and fewer people in the workforce to carry out the jobs. That's inflation, isn't it? That's
right, and that's a major problem, but the Governor of the Bank of England is not right to say that inflation is entirely down to this, or he's not right to say that companies are pushing up prices too much. Some are. There is what we call some price gouging in the supply chain, particularly, I think, food inflation. We've just seen some numbers out today. Food inflation is well over 17%. It's much higher than the basic rate of inflation, which is 10%. But the main reason we've got inflation, I think, is because of lockdown. It's a cost of lockdown crisis as much of a cost of living crisis. Supply chains were upended. You had the big post-lockdown wall of demand hitting limited supply, coupled with the fact that the Bank of England created a huge amount of money and also was then very, very slow to acknowledge the inflationary implications of what it had done. So it was slow to raise interest rates.
But it's not me, Gov. Now, did Jeremy Hunt's budget do anything to improve this situation? Will it get, even if they're a small percentage of the workforce, will it get older workers, doctors, etc., back to the office? Well, Victoria Thomason joins me down the line, and she runs Next Up, which is an agency that tries to get retired people back into the workforce. Victoria, thank you for joining us here on GB News. How big a problem do you think it is for people who've retired? How tough is it to get them back into the workplace?
Well, you've got two issues here, Nigel. You've got people leaving the workforce and then those trying to come back into the workforce. So first of all, this is an employer issue. And I couldn't agree more with what Liam was saying. This is a very small percentage of people who are causing this problem. And you can't blame the 50-plus generation for causing inflation. So what's been happening is we're seeing... Sorry, go on.
No, go on. I was amused by your comment. Continue.
So what we're seeing is the 50-plus generation are leaving the workforce in droves because work isn't working for them. A lot of them have been picking up caring responsibilities for grandchildren and for their parents, and they can't make full-time work. They would actually like to work flexibly. So this is an employer issue, and employers could make work much better for this generation. They've also got, we saw it earlier this year, we saw the Chartered Management Institute saying that the employers don't want to recruit older employees. Now, I'm 67 and I've just launched this business. We've got a tech platform, so I'm a tech entrepreneur at this age. Nigel, you're 58. I think we both would like to think we have got a great deal to offer, not now, but actually for years to come. I don't see why I shouldn't work for another 20 or 30 years. And there are plenty more like me. That was why I started Next Up, because I was seeing so many people who wanted to use their skills, they hadn't planned for retirement, and they were left, to be honest, with mental health problems. So there are a lot of people out there who would love to be working, but they can't get into the workforce.
Yeah. No, listen, I agree with all of that, and I'm 58, but I won't be after Monday. And tell me, does Jeremy Hunt's budget, does shifting, a big shift on pensions, removing the upper cap, is that going to make much of a difference in your view?
No, I think it is going to help the doctors issue, but that's a very specific, smaller part of this whole problem. As I say, this is for employers to really think about how they make jobs much more flexible, and a lot of people want to work 2, 3, 4 days a week. The thing that the government could do, I'm a businesswoman. I don't really like suggesting more legislation, if I'm honest. But if we're going to start tampering around with this, what the government could do is, first of all, to put age into diversity so that we start reporting on age like we do with equal pay for women.
That's a point.
And so what we also need to do is enforce the age discrimination laws that are out there. There is masses of age discrimination. And employers admit we haven't invested in training for this generation. We don't help them progress in careers. What is that if not age discrimination? So what we need to do is help employers to make this a better place for people to be working. And I think you would find there's a whole workforce who would love to come back and actually contribute to the economy, and they're not causing inflation. You were quite right on that.
Well, I have to say, Victoria, that in an age when we talk endlessly about diversity, it does appear that those who are more mature in years get left out of the equation. You've made that point well, and I want to wish you, a 67-year-old tech entrepreneur, the very, very best of luck with your business and in helping get people back to work. Thank you for joining us. That was interesting, Liam, wasn't it? The point that was made there, that perhaps, there are older people with skills. Maybe employers aren't flexible enough. Do you think she may have a point there?
I think she has. Of course, we've got a productivity issue. There's a huge amount of skills base there that's left unused if people are withdrawing from the workforce in their 50s and even in their 60s. We're living on average well into our 70s and into our early 80s. A lot of people don't want to hang up their boots, as it were, as we just heard from Victoria. Yeah. It does cause mental health issues. You can have a kind of slope out of retirement and out of work, an off-ramp rather than a cliff edge, because a cliff edge does cause problems. Having said all of that, if my kids were listening to this conversation, they'd say, what do you mean? The older people get all the chances. We can't even go to work anymore, and you're not going to be there to teach us. So I do think this intergenerational strife is a major part of our politics going forward. And there's a lot, I think, in what Victoria said about treating age as one of these points of diversity that should be measured if you're going to measure them.
We're measuring everything else.
Absolutely.
Liam Halligan, thank you. Victoria, thank you. I have to say, I think our conclusion from that segment is we think Jeremy Hunt's budget is going to make almost no difference in terms of numbers, and that the Governor of Bank of England, I think we conclude, is just about as useless as we've always thought he was.